I love helping families support their optimal wellness and on their whole journey, but I am not here to be your holistic band-aid. Interested to know why? Let's dive in. Welcome back. And if you're new here, I'm Dr. Anjali, the founder of Back in Balance. I'm a non-cracking, non-popping chiropractor and integrative functional nutrition specialist. Like I said, I really love helping families and workplaces optimize their health by moving well, eating well, and living well. I'm especially passionate about empowering families as they navigate the 5 trimesters from preconception to postpartum and beyond by taking a 360 approach to nervous system regulation. So let's talk about the holistic band-aid. When we are in pain, as we often experience, there's so many options to pick from. So what do you choose? Do you reach for the painkillers? Do you reach for some supplements? Do you go take a hot shower? Do you put on some patches or some type of topical ointment? What do you go to? And does that help? And how long does that help for? It might be that it takes away the pain, you go on, carry about your day. When does the pain come back? Does it come back the next day, the next week, the next month? Does it happen every so often? What is your tolerance for pain? And how much does that impact your life? And how much do you feel invested in making a change for that? Because pain is typically one of the last symptoms to show up and one of the first ones to go away. Why is that? Because we only feel about 10% of what's happening in our bodies. So think about this for a moment and why that might be the case. So we have so many chemical reactions happening at any given time. So for example, just even breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide. Do you feel that chemical reaction taking place? Because I don't. But there are so many chemical reactions taking place that we only consciously feel about 10% of that. So when we use pain as our indicator of how we are feeling, it's a pretty skewed perspective in terms of what's happening in our bodies. And so when we look at pain, which is human nature, right? I'm sure we've all done it at some point, if not even today at this moment. But when we look at pain as our sole indicator for what the quality of our life is like, what our health status is like, we might be missing a lot of information that could really help us optimize our health from this 360 approach. And the reason for this 360 approach is because really our spine, which houses our nervous system, right? From our brain down to our sending out the nerves into the rest of our bodies, and all that information going back up towards our brain so that there can be this constant communication. But the vast majority of the communication, 80% in fact, is actually the information going from the body back up to the brain. And 20% of that is the brain disseminating information back into the body. But you have the structure, right? And all the nerves are going to the different parts of the body. But you also have the organs and the tissues that those nerves are going to and actually communicating with. And so then you have those structures communicating back to the brain. And so it is really virtually impossible, I think, to really separate out structure from function. So those are really the two big foundations in terms of how our body is working. But then you have your brain for the handling the mental emotional aspect of how our body processes information. So you really have this triad of how our body perceives information, what we do with that. And so there's these 3 different categories of stress. So think about when you get a headache, for example. Hopefully you don't get terrible headaches, but chances are that you've experienced a headache in the past. And so, at least for me, when I get a headache, I kind of have to go through this mental checklist of, okay, I'm experiencing this headache. Did I drink enough water? Did I sit in front of the computer for too long? Am I really focused on something, or am I stressed out about something mentally? Did I have a good bowel movement? Like, all of these questions go through my mind because I feel like a headache is sometimes a very familiar example to say that it could be any one of those things. It could be any combination of those things, right? Sometimes I have to make sure I drink the water and do some stretches or do some muscle relaxation or make sure that I have a bowel movement or all those things, right? Sometimes it's a multifaceted approach. And I would say that for the vast majority of us, because our body has adapted and compensated for all these different types of micro stresses on a day to day basis, we really need to have the corrective care be addressing it in a similar way where it's this multifaceted approach, right? So, as much as I love working with people on their wellness journey or even on the corrective care to wellness and maintenance journey, the initial part is when people are coming in for acute pain relief, right? I get it, it makes sense. However, that's a very short term fix. So whether you're getting an adjustment, whether you're taking medication, whatever you do, whatever, fill in the blank, right? Whatever your choice is, if we're not getting to the root cause of the symptom, it just keeps showing up. So it just depends on how frequently you want to deal with it, because it's going to impact, as I'm sure you've experienced, is going to impact your productivity, your joy, right? Like just getting through the day, even if you can manage the pain. I don't know about you, but like I don't want to deal with my pain, right? It may be tolerable, but I am definitely addressing it the moment something shows up, because I just don't want to have that be part of my day. How you go about that is really important, I think, right? Because we can just cover it up. We can put a band-aid, whatever kind of band-aid that is. We can we can just manage the pain, but really it's about how do we get some corrective care in there? So how do we retrain the body to work through the different layers of tissues, right? Because our body is constantly triaging and saying, okay, this is the area that needs attention, this area needs this, but it can really only focus on one or two things at a time, right? So good thing, otherwise we might be having symptoms of all kinds all the time, and we definitely would not enjoy that. And so it's triaging and giving resources and support to what needs our utmost attention. But again, just because you feel it in one particular spot doesn't necessarily mean that that's where it's actually coming from. And this can be really confusing and not what the natural instinct would be. And so if you think you're having low back pain, the tendency is to kind of address the low back. But when there are misalignments, we'll be talking about this in one of our upcoming videos, but when there are misalignments, there it can actually impact our whole body, right? Because the whole body is connected. Remember the song, like foot bone's connected to the knee bone, or leg bone's connected to the knee bone. Like all of that is connected in our bodies. So we have to address it from multiple angles to really get to foundational support. If this is making sense to you, if this is resonating and you want to know more, I would love to have you stay in touch so that we can have you participate in our Healthy Human program. And if you are on your prenatal journey, whether you're in preconception, somewhere in postpartum, or somewhere in between, we have a 5 trimester program that really helps people dive in to understand not only what is causing their symptoms, but really how we can strengthen it and get to the root cause so that you can actually reach a place of wellness and maintenance care. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week.